9:36 Central African time, and we're going to be switching gears now. We'll be talking trade, and this one could have a very, very real and significant impact on South African businesses and jobs. There's been some good news, if I can call it that, coming from the United States of America, Washington to be specific. The US Senate has approved an extension of the African Growth and Opportunity Act, AGOA. This is through to the end of 2028, so it might outlive the Donald Trump era. If you're new to AGOA, you don't quite understand what it is. Well, it essentially gives qualifying African countries preferential, largely duty-free access to the very, very massive American market. And for us, South Africa specifically, that's very important. But there's always been a but when it comes to international trade. And whether or not, as South Africans, we should see this as a completely clean victory just yet. The legislation still has to clear some of the U.S. House, requirements and also reach President Donald Trump for signature. This is even though extension becomes law in South Africa's position is not completely secure, knowing and understanding some of the issues we've had with Washington over the last couple of years. But yeah, this review could see us being part and parcel of some of the countries that still make up AGOA, and that would give South Africa some breathing room, but not necessarily certainty as you'd like it to. And it comes at a time, as I mentioned, that South Africa and the US have seen a strain, pressure, enormous pressure when it comes to our diplomatic ties. And yeah, we'll be touching on that. We'll be joined by MacKay, founder of XA Global Trade Advisors, to unpack how significant this move is, particularly for South Africans that are doing business in the very, very big US of A market. Donald, good morning. Thank you so much for joining us. Always a pleasure having you on the show.
Morning.
Let me get your initial reaction. AGOA extension seems to be on the cards. From South Africa's perspective, how should we be viewing this news? Have we actually got a bit of reprieve here?
Well, it's better than not getting it, but we shouldn't overstate the scale of the benefit. So let me perhaps put this into some context. About 50% of what we send to the US is precious metals and minerals. That is unaffected because there are no tariffs on those products into the US. So think gold, platinum, etc. Nothing gets paid there, so AGOA has no effect. The single biggest beneficiary before the Trump tariff madness last year was the automotive industry, which had a benefit which equated to around 2.5% of there was a 2.5% duty on cars that didn't come from an AGOA country. And so there was an advantage there, but that has disappeared now because President Trump imposed those national security Section 232 duties, which effectively wiped that out because now all cars attracted 25% duty. And so AGOA doesn't really change anything. Where it does make a difference, though, is in agriculture. So you will recall President Trump's Liberation Day tariffs were recently overturned in court, and he then replaced them with a different mechanism called the Section 301 tariff. South Africa got a 12.5%, and some other countries got a 10%. This sits on top of whatever the normal duty is. So the AGOA gives us the benefit of removing the normal duties underneath that. So, on citrus, on table grapes, etc., we definitely benefit now from AGOA. But on pretty much everything else, it doesn't really make a difference.
I want to talk about access to the American market. I think there was a time where there was a lot of nervousness from a lot of South Africans, when Donald Trump came out with some very, very scathing allegations against us, and there were conversations on whether or not we could make up part of AGOA going forward. But fundamentally, just how important is the American market to South African businesses, and would we feel an impact if AGOA disappeared altogether? Who would feel that pain first internally here in the country?
Yeah, so we must not equate the US market with AGOA because they're two very, very different things. AGOA gives preferential access on a relatively small portion of goods that are traded into the US. The US is very important. I would argue if you're not in agriculture, AGOA probably doesn't make a difference in your life. If you are in agriculture, it definitely does give you a benefit. So we wouldn't want to lose it. But it is, in the greater scheme of things, the AGOA benefits are not significant enough that if we were to lose them, that we would in any way be devastated.
Very, very important. I want to come back to America itself because the U.S. Senate has approved extension, I think, till 2028. Why isn't this a done deal yet? What more needs to be done to make sure that South Africans, those that are in agriculture, as you mentioned, and those that are doing business within the confinements of AGOA, get that side of relief?
Yeah, so that's a hard question to answer because President Trump is probably the most unpredictable president in the world at the moment. And so we don't actually know if he is going to sign off at the end. I mean, who knows what might upset him between now and then that might cause him to not sign off. So we do need the sign off to happen. And until it happens, the benefits are not actually locked in place yet. So we shall have to see. But also it's important to note that although AGOA benefits us in the sense that when we sell into the US and the US importers don't pay the duty, they're more likely to buy from us. It is important to note that the benefit truly does sit with the importer, not the producer. We get access to the market, but they have to do the purchasing. So we also have to see which way the importers decide to play this.
And when we talk about this extension, I think the one fundamental thing that I'm gathering from it is if AGOA does survive but other tariffs remain, then there wouldn't be a lot of reprieve from South African exporters. Would that analysis be accurate?
Yeah, so I think what matters the most is that if the same tariff is applied to every country around the world, then we're fine, because everyone's in the same boat. Where it becomes problematic is the situation we had with the Liberation Day tariffs, where we were getting 30%. Many of our competitor countries like Chile and Peru were at 15%. That is genuinely harmful to us. But if the other tariffs are at the same level, then AGOA still has value to us. If it's a split level, like it is now, where we're at 12.5% and many other countries are at 10%, it still has a benefit because it puts us roughly in line with the others. But our trade to the US is effectively 50% mined goods and cars, but cars has now disappeared, and then agriculture. There's very, very little else that we send to the US of any significance.
Very, very interesting. Final Donald, before I let you go, if you're a South African business owner exporting to America today, should you be relieved, or should you still be having a bit of a sense of uncertainty and worry?
Yeah, you should be relieved. I mean, I don't mean to make this out like it's not a good thing. It is a good thing. But I would also recommend to anyone exporting to the US that you begin carefully looking at alternative markets you can take your product to. Because the US has become an unbelievably unreliable trading partner, and that has negative consequences. So I would begin trying to find other places you can begin to take your product to.
There we go. Donald MacKay, founder of XA Global Trade Advisors. Always a pleasure having you on air. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye. And with that, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with you after this.